Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, so in this video, I want to continue talking about kind of the circus around Donald Trump and also, some of the realities of Donald Trump, some of the real issues of Donald Trump. And, I will continue to say that I just don't, I think there are too many problems with trying to bring criminal prosecution against a former president. And honestly, like if you were really to line up all the presidents, if you knew all the things they had done, okay, because presidents, they shed blood, even President Obama, if you were to add up every single time President Obama was responsible for a drone attack that killed civilians, children, people at weddings and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sorry, presidents have blood on their hands, So I continue to think it's very problematic to try to use criminal prosecution as a tool against former presidents. Okay, I just believe that, but this is not to say that I like Donald Trump. And there's one very serious case. There's actually a couple of cases involving Donald Trump where I really, really think he showed who he was. Okay, he really showed who he was. And the case that I want to talk about here is the case of Michael Forrest Reinoehl or Reinoehl. I think it's Reinoehl. Yeah. So it's this guy is an Antifa supporter. He wasn't really. I don't think he was truly Antifa, but he was definitely an Antifa supporter. And he was kind of doing the same thing that Kyle Rittenhouse was doing, where he was sort of informally involved in sort of like the, non-police security around protests in Portland, Oregon. Okay. And he got himself too deep into some skirmishing with people that were like him on the other side. And he ended up just killing somebody, shooting him in the back, around a Portland, these Portland protests and stuff. So I really want to talk about what happened with Michael Reinoehl. So this case is about Michael Reinoehl, but I want to kind of present it, sort of as a Trump issue, and this is part of revealing, I think, the dialectical realities around Trump and why I really feel the way I do about Donald Trump. I do not like Donald Trump. Okay. Anyway, so let's just talk about this case, because this case, I think, even though it got into the media a little bit, and the media did look into it a little bit, okay, I think there's probably a lot of murky realities about it, and there is a direct connection to Donald Trump. Okay, so this went all the way up to the top. Okay, I think probably Bill Barr and Donald Trump both came together on this one, and Bill Barr, man, that guy, I'll tell you, he's such a politician. Bill Barr, he pretends to be such a nobleman, right now, because he gets to talk about, how he did not agree with the January 6th. But Bill Barr by himself, I think just his participation in lining up 13 people to execute in 2020 and early 2021, even after Trump had lost the election, they kept executing people. Think about that. Anyway, Bill Barr, man, that guy. Anyway, but let's just talk about Donald Trump. Let's talk about Michael Reinoehl. Okay, so Michael Reinoehl was a person who had a lot of problems. Okay, he was a person who lived in Portland his whole life. He was like a snowboarder. Probably when he was younger, he was probably a really cool dude. He's probably a party guy. Like to snowboard, just kind of down to earth. As he got like to his later 30s and on into his 40s, I think he started having the problems that a lot of people have, where their marriages break up, they start to have problems with life. He kind of was like one of those guys, he kind of like failed to launch. A lot of people, they get to be around 40 and then it's like, hey, I'm not a teenager anymore. Hey, I'm not in my 20s anymore. Never had a career, just did odd jobs and stuff, and just was the kind of person who was involved in like minor crime like on the level of like racing cars, getting caught racing cars, getting caught maybe with a blood alcohol level, while driving a car, things like that, like really, really petty. I mean, just not a criminal, definitely not a criminal, but kind of like what you might call a guy who's kind of like becoming almost like a loser, and maybe having some mental instability. I don't know if he was diagnosable, but he had mental instability. And he was one of these people who just kind of enjoyed the party lifestyle, just being a young person, just kind of, being the kind of a cool guy who likes to snowboard and just kind of just being a down to earth person. But, like some people, they never really get a career going, and they end up being in their 40s, and they're kind of like, you could almost say they're like losers, So definitely a person with, probably, I think Michael Reinoehl had a lot of passion for life, and I think he probably had a soul, and was a real, down to earth guy. But he also had a lot of issues. He had a marriage breakup, and apparently he was estranged from his whole family. So, a lot of interpersonal issues. Apparently he really loved his son, and he was a father. And, I think probably the best way to describe this guy is like a lot of people who get into their 40s. A lot of people have trouble evolving from being a teenager to being in their 20s to then becoming like 30 something and then 40 something. There is that transition where, some people don't make it into having a career, and some people don't make it into becoming fully developed, in the world, and they just end up being like odd jobs and just kind of continuing with like the spirit of a teenager, the spirit of a person in their 20s, but suddenly they're in their 40s. So but Michael Reinoehl was also very, very passionately, not kind of like anti-fascist, like not Antifa, but very much a supporter of Antifa. And I think he was kind of taking the extreme position that, he just couldn't believe all this right-wing politics going on with the Donald Trump presidency. And I think he was taking the side of, kind of like more left-wing, Um, and so basically, one way or another, Michael Reinoehl became one of these people, kind of like Kyle Rittenhouse, okay, where he felt moved by the spirit to, be part of, like, say, protective. He felt protective. He saw all the protesting going on in Portland, but he didn't just want to be involved in the protesting. He wanted to be involved in providing security, okay, informal, non-police security for the protesting. And they do this kind of stuff, like you'll have your protests, and then you have people who feel like they want to be leaders, and they feel moved by the spirit that they want to maybe carry their gun or their mace, and they want to help be kind of like protect the protesters, kind of, So he sort of took on that role, and I think he became involved like socially with other people that were also taking on that role, where they were sort of like kind of acting almost like protectors, kind of watching for people, and that's what Kyle Rittenhouse did. He was moved by the spirit. He wanted to go to the Kenosha protest because he wanted to provide security. He felt moved. So we're talking about people who have kind of a political calling, where they want to be sort of like leaders, sort of on some low level, but they want to take some kind of leadership role in the world of the protests. And that's an interesting psychology. It's kind of like the psychology of people back in the Spanish Civil War. A lot of Americans felt moved by the Spanish Civil War, and they wanted to go be ambulance drivers in Spain, and so they were just kind of like, some people get that calling where they feel like they want to get involved, in some informal way, in these like political events, So that's Michael Reinoehl. And basically what happened was very similar to the Kyle Rittenhouse. And what did happen with Michael Reinoehl happened just 1 week, literally days after the Kyle Rittenhouse situation in Kenosha. So you can't look at the Michael Reinoehl case without looking at the Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay. So basically what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse is that, he felt moved to be like kind of informal security. Like he said, like, I want to protect property, because he understood, that during like these George Floyd type protests, sometimes like the left wingers, who are out there protesting, sometimes they get a little excited and they might do damage to property. So his idea was, I'm going to go protect property. But also he had a lot of attitude. Like he really didn't like the Antifa types and the left wing protester types. And so he was already charged up to think of them as like the enemies. And, he carried a gun. So he obviously was expecting possibly to run into confrontation or danger, and so things went wrong. People got killed. Getting into the details of what happened, I mean, it's what you could expect to happen. It's what you could expect to happen. I'm not going to get into the microscopic of it, because I mean, I've heard stories about how he unjustifiably killed one person, and then someone came after him with a skateboard to try to disable him, and then he kept defending himself. And the bottom line is, it's what you would expect to happen. You get people with guns, and they start like policing these protests, okay? And eventually there's going to be a conflict. There's going to be conflict, and occasionally it's going to escalate, where someone's going to pull out mace, or they're going to pull out like a baton, and then somehow it's going to kind of escalate, and things are going to happen. People get killed. That's just what's going to happen. So that's what happened in Portland. Portland for months and months, or weeks and weeks, maybe up to like a month or more, they just had endless protests going on in downtown Portland, and it was just out of control. It really was. It was ridiculous. I mean, they were destroying property. They were like launching, flammable devices at like courthouses and things like that. And really, it was kind of like crazy. I mean, it was just craziness. And so a lot of people in and around Portland were really developing a resentment towards these kind of Antifa types, these kind of left-wing types, and they're just trashing the downtown. And some people were really like, this is just enough, and they wanted to get personally involved. And so it turns out this guy named Aaron Danielson, okay, who is from Portland, he had for years been getting involved kind of in right-wing politics, right-wing activism, okay. His family didn't really know all the details, and he was using a fake name, Aaron Danielson. I think it was like, I think he used a fake name. I think it was J. Like, even among the right wing activists, he wasn't using his real name, because I think he was also kind of like wanted to keep it on the down low, like how much he was getting involved in all this shady right wing stuff. But basically, um, he had been for years involved in like just right wing politics, grassroots, kind of this thing called like the Patriot Prayer. I don't even know what it is, but it's like some right wing group or whatever. But basically, he was networked in. He had a network, and he would get involved in providing that kind of security. Like sometimes he'd get involved in providing security around these protests in Portland, but like totally off the books. I mean, he's not a police officer; he's just a citizen. But they would organize groups where they would like carry mace, maybe carry a weapon, maybe carry a baton, and be prepared like Kyle Rittenhouse, to like protect property or to watch out for something going wrong, and basically just try to put in check these Antifa people. So it's kind of like, the Antifa, the right wing people, they're kind of facing off against each other, and it's really like enemies, like enemies facing off against each other. So that right there is a cocktail. Somebody's going to get hurt. Okay. If it wasn't this Aaron Danielson, someone else would have been hurt, and my understanding, there had been a lot of like fist fights, a lot of physical confrontation between the Antifas and the sort of more right-wing people that are kind of doing the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. And so there already had been, I think, a lot of physical skirmishing and a lot of kind of escalation of tensions between really what are really enemy groups, because basically, like the Proud Boys and people like the Proud Boys, they hate the Antifa, so it's like a hatred. It's almost like rival gangs, so you can expect there's going to be problems. Okay. So what happened with Michael Reinoehl? Okay, there was some misunderstanding. Okay, so I will say that I can see a misunderstanding, because Michael Reinoehl had always claimed that Aaron Danielson was carrying a knife. Okay, and it turns out that when they examined Aaron Danielson right after the shooting, it turns out he actually was carrying a gun. Okay, now that was not really known. I don't think Michael Reinoehl knew he was carrying a Glock. Okay, but he was not carrying a knife. He was actually carrying one of those like batons. You know how police have batons that you can like extend, like they're like retractable. Anyway, he was carrying a baton, but I think they thought it was a knife. Okay, so there was a little confusion. But on the other hand, Michael Reinoehl did not know he carried a Glock. He was carrying a Glock, a pistol. So that was actually another misunderstanding. So it's actually more dangerous than you might think what actually happened. But basically, what happened was that Michael Reinoehl, he, I think, in and around the day that this event took place, I don't think he was prepared to be operating around the protest, because he had been in the past. Michael Reinoehl had been kind of on the fringes, he was sort of like in and around the protests, kind of like being a little bit of a like watching out, sort of acting like providing security here and there, and just kind of watching out for the sort of like the protesters basically. But apparently he was surprised, because like there was like this major like caravan of like right wing people, like in their pickup trucks and stuff with all their flags, wanting to get close to actually where the protests were in downtown Portland. Okay, so he I think he was out with his son. He and his son were out just like doing some father and son stuff. But Michael Reinoehl, he noticed that there was like a huge caravan of right wing. So they had obviously organized something, and I don't even think he knew about it. So he dropped his son off, and then he got in touch with his contacts, kind of because they have contacts. These people who do this like Kyle Rittenhouse stuff, they sort of they have like groups, like friend groups and stuff. So he got it. He communicated with his contacts and found out that there was stuff going on, and they asked for his help, I think, or they suggested that he could go and maybe provide a little help. So Michael Reinoehl went and got close to the protest to see what was going on with all these Trump supporters and all these pickup trucks and stuff, to see what was going on. And I think they noticed there were a lot of really kind of aggressive people kind of doing the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, like sort of pretending that they're gonna put in check all these Antifa people. It's kind of like a confrontation. And they started getting close to the downtown area where there already were protests going on. So basically, you have these right wing people with their bear spray, or their mace, and some of them have guns, some of them have batons. Okay, so Aaron Danielson actually had a baton that was confused for a knife, I think. Okay, and basically people like Michael Reinoehl, they're sort of watching these guys, like keeping them in check, because basically you have these right wing people, they're prepared to put mace on protesters. They're prepared, if necessary, to pull out a baton, and get into a confrontation. So basically, Michael Reinoehl is sort of watching him, and he's listening to the conversations. And there's a lot of things that we're never going to know, okay? Because when you're on the ground level and you're doing that Kyle Rittenhouse thing, and you're on the Antifa side, those guys are hearing each other talk, okay? And so basically, Michael Reinoehl was noticing, I think, that Aaron Danielson was getting a little aggressive, okay, and probably got into some verbal altercations. And because he did notice the baton, but just confused it for a knife, he probably thought that Aaron was going to pull that knife and maybe use it, because they were getting into some kind of heated confrontation with some people, on the ground level, And so I think that basically things got a little heated. And I think Michael Reinoehl probably had in his memory, that just a week prior, there was the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. So you didn't know what was going to happen. If you're on the ground level in Portland and it's just 1 week after the Kyle Rittenhouse, okay, you don't know what's going to break out. Okay. And probably after the Kyle Rittenhouse, I think the right wing guys are even more like on alert, because they're like, we don't know what's going to happen, So if you're on the ground level 1 week after the Kyle Rittenhouse, okay, they're in Portland, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if there's going to be maybe a firefight. Maybe people are just going to pull out guns. People start shooting each other. Big fights could take place. So these guys are really on edge, And I think Michael Reinoehl, when he was interviewed after this incident, he said he felt like war had already started. He felt like there really was a civil war. And I think after the Kyle Rittenhouse incident, I think a lot of people on these ground levels, these sort of like Proud Boy types, these sort of like Antifa types, I think they really felt like they were on the edge of like a civil war, and fight, and anything could have broken out. There was a lot of talking going on, a lot of threats going on, but I think they had reason to believe that this guy Aaron Danielson, that he had been in some verbal altercations, and there was some idea that he might escalate and do something. And I think maybe just given all the tensions in the wake of the Kyle Rittenhouse and all that, I think, and maybe some things were said that we'll never know, because people can trash talk, people can really threaten each other verbally or whatever. And just knowing that everybody was pretty much armed on some level. They didn't know he carried a Glock, but just knowing that everybody had weapons of some sort, and the atmosphere is one that is about to break out in fights. Fights could break out at any moment. But basically they felt like this guy was like kind of escalating and threatening too much. And Michael Reinoehl, probably being the unstable person he was, he also had a Glock, and he pulled it out and shot this guy twice. I shot him basically in the back. Okay. And he just fell down and died right on the street, So that's a pretty big deal. Okay. That's right up at the level of the Kyle Rittenhouse. And it's basically, to me, it's kind of an echo of the Kyle Rittenhouse. It's this 1 week afterwards, the air is already really charged. There's a lot of conflict between these Proud Boy types and these Antifa types. Okay, but what happened? Why is Trump important? Trump pays attention to this crap. Okay, and Trump and Bill Barr, they hate Antifa. They hate Antifa so much. Okay, they hate Antifa. Okay, so basically, Trump, the first thing Trump did was he's like, okay, what's the Portland police going to do about this guy? We know exactly who he is. Okay, because see, on this ground level, lots of people are taking pictures. And there's a lot of intelligence. Okay, so actually, really quickly, even though the public didn't know, on the level of like intelligence, they knew who this Michael Reinoehl was. Okay, they figured out who did this, because there's a lot of cell phone footage, a lot of photographs in the area. And so basically, through intelligence, I think it was well known very, very early that Michael Reinoehl is the one that actually killed Aaron Danielson. Okay. Even though Aaron Danielson, he was using an alias. He was actually using I think it was Jay, using an alias, but they figured out who was who. And basically they knew that Michael Reinoehl was the person who shot this guy in the back. So basically Trump's position, okay, what's Portland police going to do about it? Because Portland police has been kind of playing this game where they're not going balls to the wall. They're sort of like, they're not going full throttle, just because it's all politics. It's delicate. These are protests. They're already after the George Floyd. No police department wants to be, seen as engaging in excessive force. So basically, Trump's basically putting out there, the idea like, what's the Portland police going to do about this? Okay, and then in the wake of that, Portland police, they did not find Michael Reinoehl. Okay, Michael Reinoehl turns out went out of town. I think he went to Washington State, was hiding out with friends. But Michael Reinoehl did have the balls to give an interview, not to Vice. He gave an interview to some freelance journalist, whoever, who sold his videotaped or video interview with Michael Reinoehl to Vice. And then it became public. It became major, major public that this guy had shot somebody in the back, and he's talking about it and justifying it. And Donald Trump is like, and the Portland police, they couldn't catch this guy. He's off in like crossing state lines. Now he's in Washington. And so Donald Trump, you better believe he got involved. Okay. Because Donald Trump, he loves to play that game. Like, my people are the Proud Boys. My people are the right wing. These are my people. And this Antifa is the enemy. Okay. And so Donald Trump made that mistake where he got personally involved. Okay. Even though he should be kind of removed from that stuff. And I think Bill Barr hates Antifa too. And so between Bill Barr and Donald Trump, I think but behind the lines, off the record, I think they got in touch with the FBI and with federal law enforcement, and they're like, "You're going to get this guy. You're going to get this guy." Okay, and I can't prove it, but I'm sure that Donald Trump said this one is personal. Okay, so he probably told the highest people in the FBI, the highest people in federal law enforcement, he probably made it clear somehow. And Donald Trump is so smart. He probably did it through intermediaries. He probably found people to do this for him, but he made it known to the upper levels of federal law enforcement, in my opinion. I'm guessing, but this is what I think. He made it very clear. This is personal. Okay, and you guys are going to find this guy. And if this guy produces a weapon, even if it's not like pointing the weapon, let's say if he just pulls out a weapon and says, okay, whatever, you are going to fucking kill that motherfucker. And I'm sure Donald Trump didn't say that directly. I'm sure he had it made known in the code language, that people know how to use. He made it known that this was very personal. And that's exactly what happened. They figured out exactly where Michael Reinoehl was, and they had him they had him come out of the house, or they were there when he came out of the house. One of the two. I can't remember. But basically, Michael Reinoehl realized that police were everywhere. And when I say police, federal law enforcement. So we're talking like ATF, we're talking like FBI, we're talking like a task force. Okay, a federal task force that was out to hunt this guy down. Okay, so Michael Reinoehl walks out. He realizes that he's surrounded by federal law enforcement. So I think he produced his weapon as a way of saying, hey, whatever, like, giving up. But I don't think he pointed it, okay, because they would have said that if he did. So it wasn't like he pointed the weapon, and they just did not hesitate, and they rained bullets like I'd probably more than 100 bullets on this guy, and he was just massacred. I mean, just massacred. Okay, so that right there, let's think about what's going on here. I mean, through all the haze and all the chaos and the hurricane, of the politics, we got to look at what's really going on. This is a situation where, through winks and nods and through indirect communication, but through effective communication, Donald Trump had it known, I think, to federal law enforcement, this guy's a political enemy. Okay, a political enemy. Okay. And this guy is not going to get arrested. He's not going to get a trial. He's going to get fucking massacred. I mean, massacred. Not even in an execution. In an execution, you might have, like, say, maybe 4 or 5 rifles. Okay, maybe 4 or 5 rifles. This is like tons of pistols. I mean, it's like a hail of bullets. This is not even an execution. This is a massacre. Okay. And granted, like, I'm not going to say that Michael Reinoehl is an innocent person. Okay, let's not say that. Okay, but I don't think he's that much different than Kyle Rittenhouse. You see what I mean? I mean, and you could say maybe there are little differences. Okay, little differences. Yeah, maybe Kyle Rittenhouse is maybe in a slightly different situation. The dynamics a little different, but they're close enough. Okay, and basically it's not that much different. Okay, but because Michael Reinoehl's on the wrong side of the politics. Okay, he's not going to get arrested. He's not going to get, criminal process. He's going to get massacred. Okay, and I'm sure that's what happened. Okay, so um, you know, that's where Donald Trump starts to look a little more like Vladimir Putin. You know what I mean? I mean, really. And so, and then you combine that with, the decision they made to kill 13 people on death row, federal death row, in the very last year, because it was politically, it was a tool. They had 4 years to kill all those people, but and including a mentally ill woman. Okay, that to me was really, I'm sorry, the Lisa Montgomery. Um, so basically, Donald Trump is playing his hardcore politics, and when he wants to, he thinks he's a badass, But I just want to say that, if there's anything that Trump did that really solidified for me what kind of person he is, it was the thing with the Michael Reinoehl. Okay, if Donald Trump had more class, if Donald Trump was a more noble person, okay, he may hate Michael Reinoehl, but he would know not to get that involved and to have him treated like any other criminal defendant, criminal suspect. And so, you know, um, basically what you saw there for a moment in the United States was that if you're the wrong kind of political enemy, or political criminal, you know, that you could be massacred like that. So um, I don't know. I guess, and then what I say, well, would I rather have Donald Trump have criminal charges brought against him for Michael Reinoehl? And my answer is no. Okay, because again, he's not going to go to jail. Even if you could put in a court of law that Donald Trump ordered the extrajudicial execution of Michael Reinoehl, even if you could prove it, even if he were convicted, you cannot put a president in prison. You just can't do it. Okay. So, and I've explained why, basically just because of security concerns and the fact that a president is already in prison. An ex-president has no freedom because they have secrets, and they're a delicate target, and by law they have to be protected by by law. A president has to be protected by secret service at all times. So they can't really be in prison. Um, so no, I would not be in favor of bringing I would not be in favor of bringing criminal charges against Trump for what happened with Michael Reinoehl. Okay, now, but do I think Trump is guilty? Oh yes, of course, yeah, and I think it showed what kind of person he is. It showed what kind of president he was, and the way he would operate with favoritism towards people that were on his side, or how he would treat political enemies, and you saw it right there what Trump's capable of. And so, no, I don't think Trump. I mean, I guess like in an ideal universe, he deserves to be prosecuted for what he did. But I'm just saying, I know we're not in that world where you could actually really prosecute a president. I mean, you can prosecute a president, but you can't actually execute the punishment. You know what I mean? So it's just a waste of government money to bring criminal charges against Donald Trump. However, Trump is a killer. But Biden is also a killer. Biden knows full well that by not doing what he had to do to resolve the Ukrainian conflict before Russia invaded. Okay, this is the thing. Biden knew weeks in advance that Russia was planning on making some kind of, technical invasion of Ukraine. Biden knew about that. And instead of doing everything possible to avoid that conflict, Biden sort of allowed it to happen. Okay, because Biden has other geopolitical interests, okay, that for him are more important than the hundreds of thousands of young people in the Ukraine and Russia who have to die for this. Okay, so Biden has blood on his hands too. Also, when Biden ordered the the retreat from Afghanistan, the withdrawing of troops from Afghanistan, Biden knew what was going to happen, how people would get killed, so he has blood on his hands too. But anyway, bottom line is, what happened with Michael Reinoehl really shows you